Imagine Diablo, Factorio, and Defense Grid all decided to drop you onto an alien planet, hand you a mech, and say, good luck, don't die. This is the Riftbreaker, a game that somehow manages to be incredibly addictive, really frustrating, and honestly, kind of okay. Hello people, welcome back to 100 Games You Should Play. The series where I play for 100 games so you don't have to, unless they're actually worth your time. Today we're looking at the Riftbreaker, an isometric base building ARPG where your biggest enemy is the tech tree and your own patience. In this video I'll break down the gameplay and mechanics, story, characters and world, visual and audio, UI, UX and accessibility, replay value and longevity, value and monetization, and I'll tell you where it lands on my S to shit tier list. So, gameplay first, because that's where the Riftbreaker actually shines and where it eventually wore me down. Moment to moment, you're doing two things: building and defending a base, running around in your mech, Diablo-style, shredding waves of aliens. Controls are pretty straightforward. WASD movement, mouse aiming, abilities and hotkeys. It feels responsive. Dodging projectiles and weaving through enemies actually works when you don't panic. Combat is very Diablo coded. You hike big crowds, pop abilities, and watch health bars disappear in clumps. It's satisfying, but then at least at first. You've got a bunch of weapons and abilities to unlock, from basic rifles and flamethrowers, up to things like nukes and acid launchers and ridiculous AIE abilities. The progression is tied into research and resource production. Build the right structures, unlock new tech, craft stronger gear. It's that classic just one more upgrade loop that keeps you playing longer than you planned. Encounters can go from a small smirkish that lasts about 20 to 30 seconds to absolutely massive base assaults that stretch for a few minutes while you're scrambling to repair walls, drop turrets, and spam abilities. When the difficulty tuning hits right, it's great. You feel overwhelmed, but just barely in control. But here's where it started to fall apart for me. The difficulty can spike hard if you don't follow the intended tech path. I got stuck more than once, not because the enemies were interesting, but because the game doesn't communicate well and what you should upgrade next. At certain points, I was basically relying on guides to figure out what the game wanted from me, which kills the flow completely. Gameplay and mechanics? Surprisingly deep and generally addicting, but the tuning and progression became more of a brick wall. And once I hit that wall, the fun started to drain pretty fast. Story, characters, and world is where Riftbreaker is definitely not a Diablo rival. There is a story. You're a scientist sent to an alien planet to set up a base, study the environment, and eventually open the rift back home. There's some banter between the protagonist and the AI, and some bits of lore. It's a general sci-fi framework. The problem is pacing. The story moves slow. Missions often boil down to build X, research Y, survive X. And the narrative just kind of tags along. It's never really grabbed me or gave me that I need to see what happens next feeling. It's more functional than compelling. Most of the storytelling is delivered through an in-mission dialogue, radio chatter and objectives, instead from the big cinematic cutscenes and meaningful choices. There aren't deep character arcs or big emotional beats. It's not offensively bad, it's just there. You're mostly here for the systems, not the plot. For me, the story became background noise. I was engaged by the base building and combat loop, but not by what everyone was saying or why we were technically on this planet in the first place. On the visual side, Riftbreaker looks pretty good. The isometric perspective shows off big, detailed bases, swarms of aliens, and plenty of particle effects. When a full wave hits and all your turrets light up on the map, it absolutely delivers that sci-fi warzone vibe. The art direction leans into bright lasers, glowing shields, and lots of environmental effects. Swarms, night and day cycles, different biomes. It can get visually noisy during big fights, but in a way that mostly feels chaotic in a fun way rather than unplayable. Audio is solid too. Weapons sound punchy, explosions feel impactful, and the aliens creatures plus base alarm sirens do a great job of spiking your anxiety right before a major attack. The music tends to sit in the background, building tension rather than dominating the experience. It fits, even if you don't want to be humming any of the tracks later. Performance-wise, the more stuff you build and the more enemies on screen, the more you can feel your system working. It's not completely broken, but when the screen is full of turrets, effects, and swarms, it can get a bit chunky. Not enough to ruin the game, but enough that you notice your PC is aware of what's happening. UI and UX are a mixed bag. On one hand, the HUD gives you a lot of information, resource counts, minimap, health, abilities, cooldowns, and so on. Once you're used to it, you can glance around and see what you need. On the other hand, the game throws a lot of systems at you. Power production chains, research, environmental hazards, and the way it expands them isn't always great. The tutorial covers the basics, but it doesn't always prepare you for how punishing mistakes can be later. That's a big part of why I ended up tabbing out to look at things instead of figuring them out naturally. There are some accessibility basics like subtitles and the ability to tweak difficulty, which is nice. You can adjust how aggressive the swarms are, damage values, that kind of thing to tailor the plan. Control remapping and basic options are there, but this isn't some gold standard accessibility showcase. It's at least serviceable. Overall, the UI and UX gets the job done. It could communicate the progression and what you should care about right now much better. That lack of clarity is absolutely part of what pushed me towards guides. In terms of replay value, Riftbreaker gives you a decent amount on paper. You've got a full campaign, survival/wave modes, lots of tech to unlock, and pretty flexible base building sandbox. If you're the kind of player who loves optimizing layout, trying new builds, and cranking the difficulty up, you can squeeze a lot of hours into this. The core loop is definitely strong enough to keep you hooked on the game for a while. For me personally though, it felt like one and done. I played, I got addicted for a chunk of hours, hit the grind and confusing progression, and I once bounced off. I didn't really feel any pull to come back. There isn't big narrative branches, crazy alternative endings, or widely different playstyles that made me want to rerun the whole thing. So it's good if you're into the systems. Pretty limited replay appeal if you're more story driven or the grind starts to wear you down like it did for me. Value wise, Riftbreaker is a fairly straightforward package. You buy the game, you get the full campaign with extra modes. There's DLC out there, but it isn't some aggressive microtransaction pit. No battle passes, no gacha, no pay for power nonsense. The question is more, does the time you get out of it feel worth the price? If you click with the gameplay loop and you're into base building and an ARPG combat, you can actually get your money's worth here. It's dense, there's a lot of content, and you can lose hours to tweaking your base and surviving bigger and bigger swarms. In my case, even though I did get hooked for a while, the slow story pace and the reliance on guides made it feel more like a fling than a long-term relationship. I don't regret playing it, but it's not something I see myself reinstalling. So I'll call it decent value, just not amazing. And very dependent on whether this specific style of game is your thing. So overall, the Riftbreaker is one of those games that is better movement to movement than it is as a full package. The gameplay loop, build, defend, upgrade, repeat, it's generally fun and pretty addicting. The Diablo-style combat worked. Blowing up thousands of aliens never really gets old. But the slow, forgettable story, the messy progression clarity, and the moments where I just sat there and I alt-tabbed to look at what I had to do. All that dragged the experience down for me. It went from, I can't stop playing, to, I'm forced myself to finish this. If I had to sum it up, it's fun to play for a while, not fun to fight with, and not strong enough overall to make me want to come back. On my S to tier list, Riftbreaker lands firmly in C tier. C tier for me means it's worth trying once, it has its really good parts, but it doesn't stick the landing enough to be memorable or replayable. It's not bad, it's not amazing, it's just okay. An okay game with some generally great ideas that didn't quite become a long-term favorite. For into-base builders, ARPG combat, and you don't mind a bit of grind and guide checking, give it a shot. If you need strong story pacing or hate getting stuck with unclear progression, you might want to skip this one. Let me know where you'll put the Riftbreaker in your tier list. Like this video if your base has ever exploded in the worst way possible. Subscribe for more 100 games you should play, and I'll see you in the next one. Love you. I'll see you later.